a lot of my content is dynasty focused, so prospects are a big part of that. I try to kind of encapsulate everything, and I've always loved the minor leagues. I grew up, I've always lived within 15 minutes from Portland, Maine, AA for the Red Sox. Even back when they were with the Marlins back in the 90s and early 2000s. So I saw Hanley Ramirez come through here. I saw Beckett, Pedroia, Lester, Mookie. The list goes on and on.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the show. That's a weird thing to say. To the show we go. Kind of a strange sentence there. I'm your host, Ed Hand, and I'm joined, as always, and I can say as always because he doesn't take any days off, Andrew Parker. How are you doing today, Andrew?
I'm good, Ed. I'm not in the driver's seat right now, so it's a good feeling.
Yeah, you're letting me drive. You don't have one of those driver ed wheels where you can jam on the brakes. I'm in complete control now, and you're just at my mercy. But it's going to be a good show today. We've got a guest that's been a favorite of mine for the last few months on the Twitter, and then I realized, this guy is actually supremely accomplished. We've got Eric Cross of RotoBaller, FTN Fantasy as a writer, as well as one of the hosts of the Toolshed Podcast. Am I missing anything here, Eric?
I think you pretty much covered it.
Cool. Well, thank you again for joining us. We're really happy to have you. But before we jump into the baseball, I do have a question for you. And I can say this because I have a name that's somewhat similar. Are you familiar with the movie Blade or the character Blade?
Yeah, the Wesley Snipes movie.
Yeah. That character's name is Eric Cross. Now his last name is Brooks, but that's Eric Cross Brooks. So is that were your parents big Blade fans?
No, it's funny. I've not seen that movie in such a long time that I didn't even remember that was part of the name of Blade. Now it's funny. My name actually almost was going to be Christopher because my mom wanted to name me Chris Cross, but my dad put the kibosh on that pretty quickly, and it turned into Eric. But no, I don't think either one of them were big Blade fans that I know of.
Yeah, my parents, my name is Edward Hand, and my middle name starts with an S. The Tim Burton movie, Edward Scissorhands, came out 3 years after I was born. My name was supposed to be Abraham, but that was shot down because they thought I would get bullied too much. So, yeah, it's fun. It's kind of funny how these things work out sometimes. But no, it's good to have you here. So something that I am always really curious about, because I'm a big, I would say I am a junkie of fantasy baseball analysis. I've gotten the magazines every year, probably since I was 8 or 9, like the Lindy's of the world, that stuff. How did you get into fantasy baseball?
Yes, it's funny that you brought up the magazines because that was me as well. I mean, it still is.
Yeah, same.
Every year, it used to be early January, then it kind of got pushed back a little bit, right after Christmas. It was always, you see that first one come out, and then obviously a few more come after that. It was always all right, baseball season's coming. It's great. And, I got into the writing part back right before the 2017 season. There was a site called Fantrax, which is also a fantasy sports platform. They put out an email to all their user base that they were starting a content side of their website. And I didn't even see the email first off, but my buddy, forwarded it to me. He's like, "Hey, I know, him and I, talked about it. I was like, I wanted to kind of get into it as a little side thing." He's like, "Hey, I know you've been kind of thinking about doing this. This place is starting, from scratch, and maybe it'd be good to get in there." So I sent in a article that I wrote, which was actually on, I believe it was a player profile on Austin Meadows back when he was still in the Pittsburgh Pirates system back in the day as one of their top prospects. And yeah, they liked me, brought me on board, and here we are nearly 8 years later. And I always knew I wanted to get into this because I've been just a baseball junkie in general since I was old enough to walk. Growing up, I grew up really in the 90s, watching the Red Sox and Nomar and Mo Vaughn and all of them. So I love baseball from a very, very early age. started playing fantasy probably I think it was in middle school, 11, 12 years old, just with some friends. And then just loved playing that and just added more and more leagues. So when I was looking into the writing part of it, I was like, all right, this could just be a fun little side thing. I can, I've always been decent at writing. So let me, just do this as a little side project. And if something comes from it, great. If not, no big deal. I love it anyways. And yeah, it just kind of ballooned from there and to where I am now. And it's still as fun now as it was on day one, writing that Austin Meadows article. So I love baseball. I love fantasy baseball, and just putting out content, whether it be written or podcast or otherwise about it, is just a blast to do.
What was it? I think Ed's frozen, but
now, did you go to school for journalism or writing or anything like that?
I did not know.
I think he's got some bad.
What's your background in as far as like work?
So a lot of my day job has been in manufacturing. I manage a bedding manufacturer in here in Maine. So I do the day job, go home, do the dad thing. I got 2 kids, and then once I get them to bed, that's when usually I record podcasts, do my writing. I thought about going to school for journalism, but at this point, I don't have time in my day to go back and go to school for that. So. But yeah, I always loved writing. I took journalism classes in high school, so I guess that's something. So in my school here in Maine, there's different, once you got up like junior, senior year, there was like different variations of like English class that you could take, and I gravitated to the journalism side. So I guess I had a little bit extra than most high school kids did. But yeah, I've always loved to write, always did well at it, and thought, might as well combine that with my passion for baseball. I'm a numbers guy too, so love digging into stats and everything. I always, grew up looking through the newspaper at the box scores, and then online, once the internet became, more prevalent. So thought might as well combine all 3 of those and do this thing.
Yeah, that's something that so Parker and I met covering the Woo Sox. We would both go to the games there and try to interview players, and I was working for Sox prospects at the time. But nobody that's working in the minors, it's the only thing that they're doing. It really has to be something that's out of passion. And I would imagine that the same thing is true for what you're doing with writing for fantasy, because you have so many people that would love to be doing the same thing, that would love to not even necessarily get paid for it, but just to have that profile. Which makes me, I'm just curious because I was just looking at some of your credentials. You were the 2021 FSWA Baseball Writer of the Year. What does that stand for, and what was that award?
Yeah, it stands for Fantasy Sports Writers Association. Every year, actually, right around this time, they'll probably start having a nomination period open pretty soon here. But usually, right around mid-November, late November. They open up nominations, and they have a lot of different categories. Like I think there's 6 or 7 different ones for baseball. You got, Writer of the Year, which is obviously, the MVP. We'll compare it to baseball awards here. That's like the MVP. Then you got, best, ongoing series, best individual article, best research article, best podcast, stuff like that. I think there's a couple more that I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but then they do that for football. There's even more for football because we know football is huge, and then they do basketball, hockey, college, sports, and I think there's a few other ones too. So all in all, they probably give out 25, 30 awards across various sports. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to even just being a finalist that year. As they announced the finalist, it was me and I think 3 or 4 others, and that was already like blowing me away. I was like, wow, there's so many great writers in this space that it was just an honor to be included as a finalist. And then a month and a half later, or whenever it was, in like mid-January, they put out the winners, and to win it was really surreal because obviously I love doing what I do, and I love when people tell me that my passion for baseball kind of bleeds through into my writing. I think that's one of the biggest compliments anyone can give me. So just doing something that I'm so passionate about, that I've worked so hard at, to be recognized with an award like that was really just like a surreal moment.
Yeah, so you write for a couple of things. You write for RotoBaller and FTN Fantasy. Do they put you on like a schedule for that, or is it like you write when you feel like writing something? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, no, I'm on a schedule for both. Obviously a little bit less this time of year because the off season with those two sites. But yeah, during the season, I was doing 2 articles a week at each place, and yeah, I would have set nights or mornings when I would submit my stuff, and then I also have my own little my little Patreon, my little side thing that I just write. It's just me, so I write whenever and wherever I want to. So, but yeah, I do usually have one or two articles a week at each of those sites every season.
Now, are you into any of the simulator leagues, or is it just like fantasy? Because so I grew up playing APBA, which is a lot like Diamond Mind or Stratomatic or those games, and they're a little bit different because there's the gameplay aspect to it that go and it's, at least for APBA, it's based off of last year's statistics. So it's a little bit different, but I always would use the fantasy sources because you're getting the same scouting. It's valued a little bit differently, like strikeouts, stolen bases, stuff like that gets, I think, disproportionately rewarded in fantasy, but it's all still fairly valid. So I'm just wondering if that's if you're fantasy exclusive or if you've kind of dabbled in other things.
No, I'm just fantasy exclusive right now, but I have thought about doing something like that. So it's something I might dabble in here, this upcoming year or in the future for sure.
Cool. How has this is a little bit we're gonna get into real baseball questions in a minute, I swear, but your background is just so interesting to me with this. You also host the Toolshed Podcast, and that's with Chris Clegg, who we've had on. We love Clegg here. How did that start, and how do you know Chris?
Yeah, so it started back when we were both at that site Fantrax that I mentioned a little while ago. I was kind of like the lead baseball guy there, and I'd bring people on. And Chris was an up and coming writer at the time, and obviously a phenomenal one. You guys know Chris is great. So he was like, "All right," I'm like, "This is a guy I want to bring on the Fantrax. I think he'd make our team better." So brought him on to the writing team. I think earlier that year we started the podcast right around Halloween in 2020. I think we brought him on probably in the springtime, if I recall correctly, of that year. And then him and I quickly clicked just by talking about content plans and stuff like that. It was clear that him and I kind of had very similar interests within the baseball and fantasy baseball umbrella. So we started talking more late summer, early fall, like, hey, let's collaborate on something. And naturally, as I mentioned earlier, when we were before we started recording, like, who didn't start a podcast in 2020? So that was kind of like the common thing back then. So like, hey, let's start a podcast, see where it goes. And the fact that we just recorded last night, episode 350 of that podcast, and we're now a little over 4 years later. I think shows that Chris and I work together so well. We're similar. We both love all of baseball, including the minor leagues. So we kind of go all throughout, even talk about the draft all the way up, through the major leagues. And I think it was easy to work with Chris because he has that similar passion and drive that I have. So it was easy to see that. And obviously he's very, very knowledgeable. It's kind of funny to have the differing lingo here. Like he's a Southern guy. I'm a Northeastern guy. So we got the different accents going on, which is kind of funny. But yeah, it was very easy to start a podcast with Chris. And, we record, we've been recording, usually 2 a week ever since then and for the last 4 years. And it's been a blast to grow that podcast and just talk about baseball and all facets of it, major leagues, minor leagues, draft, prospects, everything. We were just out at the Arizona Fall League a couple weeks ago talking about that stuff. So just another avenue to talk about this game we all love. And yeah, it was an easy thing to start with him, and glad that we're still doing it.
Yeah, and on that note, we're gonna move towards to some of this game that we love. And I just gotta know for you, what are you a Red Sox fan? Because you grew up in Maine. You said you grew up. Are you still a Red Sox fan first and foremost, or have you become more of just a fan of baseball in general?
I mean, no, I'm still definitely a Red Sox fan. I don't. I love baseball too. Like I'll talk about like Rockies all day. I don't care. But yeah, I'm definitely huge Red Sox fan. Live and die with this team, good or bad. And as you know, it's been a little bit of everything over the last really this entire 21st century. But I try not to let my my love for the Red Sox bleed into my content too much. I mean, I've been called a Red Sox homer and a Red Sox hater in the same day because I was talking good about one guy, bad about another guy. I'm like, I say it how it is, whether it's good or bad. I'm a realist, but yeah, definitely always I'll love the Red Sox till the day I die.
Well, I'll start with a Red Sox question for you then. Qualifying offers were made. Biggest surprise, Nick Pivetta getting a qualifying offer. He, to me, has always been kind of a number 4 starter. Like, he's your number 4 starter. You're in good shape. But it was surprising to see that. And the news comes out today that he's most likely going to be rejecting the qualifying offer. A lot of teams thinks that he has the stuff to be a frontline starter. What are your thoughts on that entire situation? Were you surprised like I was? Were you sort of expecting it? And where do you think he ends up going?
Yeah, no, I was very surprised when they extended that qualifying offer to him. I know they've always thought highly of Nick Pivetta, and there are times when he's looked like a frontline guy or close to it. I mean, I think was it that second half of last year, I mean 2023, there's that stretch where he was really dominant. So was Cutter Crawford. They're both kind of gelling at the same time. And then even this year, it's like he'll have a 3-4 starts where he gives up only 4 earned runs total, and then he'll give up 3 straight starts of 5+. It's so inconsistent with him. I mean, he misses a ton of bats. That's what he's always been. I mean, over 170 strikeouts each of the last 3 seasons. So like he can look like kind of masquerade as a frontline guy, but for a little bit of time. But yeah, I'm definitely with you, Ed. I mean, when you factor in the downside of Pivetta, I mean, he's better in that 3-4 range for sure. I'm not sure where he ends up. I mean, I think the Dodgers are looking. I mean, Dodgers are in on everybody, which is insane. But I know the Dodgers are looking to kind of shore up that rotation because they still won a World Series, with having a ragtag rotation in the postseason. But I obviously can see him going there. I know if he'd go within the division with Baltimore, I think we need an arm or two to add to their rotation, especially if Burns were to leave. But I'd be okay with Pivetta coming back too. I don't know if he does reject it, what if they look to further those talks after that? I'm not sure. Obviously, the Red Sox are talking to a lot of players right now and a lot of big name guys, Burns and Fried, and maybe trade for Crochet, guys like that. So, I don't know if they're looking to get at least probably 2 good arms, including a frontline guy. So, kind of hard to figure out where he's going to go. But I like Pivetta. I think he's a good pitcher, but too inconsistent, at least for me to want to rely on him as a guy that'd be like my, one of my top 2 guys. So kind of risky in that regard, but definitely still a good arm.
So this is a question that it's both real baseball, but it's also for fantasy baseball because I'm interested in your perspective. The number 1 free agent, and this is even with Roki Sasaki joining the fray here, has been Juan Soto. And I don't think that's going to change. I don't think a guy like Soto very often reaches free agency. We've been kind of spoiled these last 2 years with Ohtani last year and now Soto here. There are some that would say you throw everything that you possibly can to get a Juan Soto. There are others that would rather you spread the pool of your resources around and get a few guys. I guess in this circumstance, getting a few guys, we'll just stick with the Red Sox perspective here. It's like Teoscar Hernandez, Max Fried, and Tanner Scott, like some objectively very good players, but not Juan Soto. Which do you think is the better, maybe not the better move, but the move that you would make if you were running this team, both in fantasy and then if there is a difference in like regular, like real baseball?
Yeah, so for real baseball, I mean, I love Juan Soto. He might be my favorite non-Red Sox player ever. I mean, I've loved the guy since he came up with the Nats as a 19-year-old. And it's crazy to think that he's already played for 4 teams and he's 26 years old. I mean, this is crazy for a guy like that good to be on 4 different teams and maybe a 5th team here if he signs with a new team. But for the Red Sox, it's hard to say. I mean, I would love to I would not be mad if they went out and got Juan Soto. Let's just say that, because obviously he's, modern day Ted Williams pretty much. But I do think it'd be better for the Red Sox to use that money for other avenues, is because there are multiple holes on that team. Obviously, the bullpen needs to be almost completely revamped. We need, at least one, maybe two good starters. And yeah, we might trade for one of them, Crochet or whoever. So we could just dip into our prospect pool. We need a right-handed bat. So like you're mentioning, I think Teoscar plus Fried plus Scott probably is in the vicinity of half of what you'd have to give Soto. So I feel like I would lean going towards that route for the Red Sox specifically. Like, if they had a lot of those pieces in place and like, all right, we're, one big bat away, I'll go, throw all the chips in for Juan Soto. Absolutely. And again, I would not be mad for a second if we went out and got him. Though I don't think we will, but crazier things have happened. But for fantasy though, a guy like Juan Soto, I mean, if I had a Juan Soto and someone came up and offered me, hey, I'll offer you Max Fried, Teoscar, and Tanner Scott, I would laugh at them. I would be like, that's not even remotely in the discussion, because then you got to factor in, if you're trading, 4-3 guys, giving away one, you got to drop two other guys to make room, so there's a lot of other things that go into it. But yeah, a Juan Soto in fantasy is a top 5 guy overall. I mean, he's up there, obviously that top tier. It's him, it's Ohtani, it's Judge, it's Bobby Witt Jr., it's Jose Ramirez, guys like that. And then you're looking at, Fried's like a top 100 guy, Teoscar kind of top 100 as well. Scott depends on if he's closing or not, but you don't trade a top 10 guy. You'd want at least a top 25 guy, which is like Rafael Devers range. And then you'd want, like, Fried would have to be like the third piece, not the leading piece. So yeah, he's definitely much more valuable in a fantasy. But yeah, for the Red Sox, I think I'd rather see them go use that money in multiple avenues, just because, like I said, there's multiple holes they got to fill on this team.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I do think though that if they get Soto, that all bets are off as far as the spending goes, and maybe you can just go and sign some of those guys too. I don't know if it's an either or thing, but we just have no idea what they're going to be doing this offseason. We still really don't, and that's, I think, why it's exciting and people are getting very impassioned about it. I'm really hoping that this isn't another Full Throttle thing where we think that they're going to go and make some big moves for people, and then they get Lucas Giolito and that's it. And they trade Chris Sale. But I guess I think it's a good answer, and it's an interesting answer. Moving a little bit away from the Red Sox, just as somebody writing about fantasy, what was the biggest surprise for you in 2024?
Man, there were a few of them, but I think two guys that were counted on and drafted as top 5 guys really were just not impactful at all first half of the season. That was Corbin Carroll with Arizona, and then Julio Rodriguez with Seattle. Fortunately, both of them picked it up second half of the year, especially Corbin Carroll, who would suddenly remembered how to hit home runs in like the middle part of July. I think he had 2 home runs through middle of July. Then he had like 20 the rest of the way. I think the shoulder injury that he had end of the previous year throughout the offseason probably played somewhat of a factor in that early season struggles. And, obviously shoulders can really impact the player's power, but seeing 2 of them really struggle and not just, like underwhelm, like they were bad. Like there was a point where Corbin Carroll was hitting around the Mendoza line middle part of the season without hitting for power. All he was really doing was stealing some bags here and there. So that was really a surprise. And we saw some pitchers come out of nowhere too. Like Reynaldo Lopez with the Atlanta Braves kind of came out of nowhere. I remember I actually saw him in spring training in Florida this past March, and he had a good start. I think it was against Toronto, if I recall correctly. And like, all right, this guy's in the running. He'll probably get the number 5 spot. Then he posts a sub-2 ERA. And you had a lot of guys like that, which was really needed because we had so many guys go down to injury, which is always the case. We know this. Pitchers are very, fragile, handled with care. But I think this year was so many more than usual. a lot of big names. Strider going down. Obviously, we were without Sandy Alcantara, Shane McClanahan, Jacob deGrom. Like, the list goes on and on. So seeing guys like that really step up was huge and needed, and pretty surprising for guys like Lopez.
Yeah, it's interesting what you mentioned before that with Rodriguez and with Corbin Carroll. Like, does that concern you more than a guy that just gets hurt like Ronald Acuna or someone like that? Or is it just like, well, they stayed healthy, this is just a sophomore needing to make adjustments? Like, what do you find more concerning, an injury risk or a guy that God, I'm having a brain fart on the word, but like a guy that regresses?
Yeah. I think with Ronald Acuna, I think when there's a history starting, like, that's more than just like one injury. You could talk that about, okay, it was a fluke thing, or, one single incident, right? But when Acuna, I'm like, all right, Acuna is now torn an ACL twice, and I think if I can't remember exactly what he was doing the first injury, but his last injury, he was kind of, if I recall, he was like rounding second base, kind of just dancing there, and then he just went down because he just twisted his knee wrong. So that is very concerning to me. So I think when compared to Acuna to the other two, I'm more concerned about Acuna. And so we know, like, we saw what he did in 2023. What do you have? 41 home runs, 73 steals, or whatever it was.
40-70 club, the originator of it.
Yeah. Who knows? Otani might do 90-90 this year or something. Who knows what that guy wants to do? But side note, the fact that we had a 40-70 club and a 50-50 club in back-to-back years is just insane. You can say what you want to baseballs or Jews, whatever. I mean, it's fun. Two things we've never seen happen before in 50 whatever years of baseball. That's really cool. But with Carroll and Julio, I think there is some concern, not a high level of it, because I think, I've always said that player development is not linear, even when you get to the major leagues, because, both these guys burst onto the scene in 2023 and had two of the better rookie years we've seen, in the last decade plus. But then even the best rookies, pitchers, these are the best pitchers in the world, will figure them out. Like, all right, this guy can't handle breaking balls, or this guy can't handle high fastballs, or whatever it might be. They'll find that weakness, attack it, and then it's on the hitter to adjust back. And then if you adjust back, then you're not golden, but then you're usually pretty good to go, and you're going to be a great player. And I think we saw those adjustments happen. Took a little longer, and their stats kind of were impacted by it. But I'm not really concerned majorly by either of their two struggles. I mean, Julio a little bit more than Corbin, because Julio's always been a very aggressive hitter, doesn't walk a ton, and that can always get exploited by pitchers. So maybe a little bit of concern there, but I don't really have a high level concern on either guy. But Acuna, I do. I mean, when he's healthy, we know he's one of the best players on the planet. Still very young, but are those knees going to continue to be an issue? We've seen it, like Byron Buxton kind of derailed his career. Mike Trout, different injuries, but Mike Trout, now he's a shell of himself and can't stay on the field with his back issues. So we've seen these recurring injuries, especially in the same area of the body, like Acuna with his knees. That is a pretty big red flag for me.
Now, how much are you covering like the minors in baseball? Because I know Clegg does his Sox prospect stuff, and you guys were talking about the Arizona Fall League. But how much of the focus for you is on the minors versus the majors?
I'd say it's probably pretty split. I watch a lot of, I have minor league, MILB TV. I watch some minor league games when I can, and I'm always kind of combing through video and box scores and digging in the data to, see some trends. But I love the minor leagues. So I try to, keep it as close to a 50-50 split as I can, because especially with me covering, I cover like a lot of things, but, a lot of my content is dynasty focused. So prospects are a big part of that. I try to kind of encapsulate everything. And I've always loved the minor leagues. I grew up, I've always lived within 15 minutes from Portland, Maine, AA for the Red Sox. Even back when they were with the Marlins back in the 90s and early 2000s. So I saw Hanley Ramirez come through here. I saw Beckett, Pedroia, Lester, Mookie, the list goes on and on. Guys I saw go through there. So that kind of at a young age drew me to that. I'm like, oh wow, like I saw this guy, then he turned into an all-star, maybe even a Hall of Fame caliber player with some of these guys. So that always was really, really cool to me, especially, 10, 12, 14-year-old me. I'm seeing these guys that might turn out to be something really cool, in a few years. So that always drew me. So I always knew I wanted to kind of have my content, always a good chunk of it, be around prospects and whatnot, kind of trying to figure out who's to be good, who might not be so good. It's always a unknown element of like the what if factor. Like, what if this guy adds power? What if this guy adds on the pitch? It's so, it's so tantalizing and thought provoking that I've always been drawn to it. So yeah, I'd say I try to keep my, pretty split 50-50 between majors and minors.
Well, now you're more up my alley now with minor league baseball, because that's my true love. I'm actually even wearing a nice Portland Sea Dogs
nice. Love it
for you there. But you mentioned earlier that you had been down in the Arizona Fall League a couple weeks back, and obviously the Fall Star game just happened, and the AFL is about to wrap up. So what was the experience like for you down there? Was there any players that you were keeping an eye on? I heard it was a lot of offense, not as much of a pitching heavy league is what I was told. So, and those games I heard are taking a long time. So what was your experience down there, and what players were you focusing on?
Yeah. The fall league is always, I don't want to say crapshoot, but you never know what you're going to get. It's a very mixed bag. I was at, I think the first game we were out there for a full week, Clegg and I. That first game we were at, I think took 2 hours, 20 minutes or something like that. The next day we were at a 3-hour, 40-minute game. It was just because there was like 23 walks, 5 errors. I think the Peoria team had 5 errors in the first 4 innings. Yeah, the other couple of nights ago. It's you never know what you're going to get, especially on the pitching side. But yeah, it definitely is more hitter friendly, especially this year. There was even less, good pitching than usual. The one big pitching name, obviously, was the, for most people, the number one pitching prospect in baseball, Andrew Painter of the Philadelphia Phillies. I caught a start when I was out there. I think he's actually pitching today too. I think he's made like 6 or 7 starts now. He was phenomenal. I mean, still shaking off the rust, obviously, after missing all of last year, but like, he looks like an ace. Like, he looks, I don't throw on that term lightly, as I think that gets thrown around way too much. I mean, there's really like 8 or 9 true aces in baseball, I think. And just because you're a team's number one does not mean you're an ace. I think those two kind of get blended together too often. But Painter looks like a guy that could be a Cy Young caliber guy. I mean, if anyone were to be this year's or next year's Paul Skeens, which I'm not saying is going to happen because that was phenomenal, it'd be Andrew Painter, because he's that good. I mean, he's got 4 really good pitches. He can hit triple digits with a fastball, and the fact that he can do that while not walking many guys. I mean, you look back at his last full year in 2022. I think he had like 21 walks to 160 strikeouts or something ridiculous like that. Something he's like Pedro-esque, almost like 8-1 strikeout to walk ratio or something like that. So he was really fun. A lot of good hitters, just to name a few here. Josue Briseño, Detroit's first base prospect. I think he's hit 9 home runs in 20 games out there. He's been dominating. Zaire Hope of the Dodgers has been really impressing. Matt McClain's out there of the Reds. Thomas Ajazi's out there with the Cardinals. There's a lot of good hitters out there, but yeah, keep in mind, like, again, quality of pitching, not the greatest. So all these numbers are going to be absolutely inflated. But yeah, Briseño, really, really impressive. Like, that guy has legit power, and he's big, like 6'5", first baseman. So I think he's really impressive. And another one too, real quick, Alejandro Ozuna with the Texas Rangers looks like Bo Bichette. I posted a picture using the on deck circle, and so it was from behind. He has the same hair as Bichette, the same like build. Obviously a little smaller. Obviously Texas, so he's a blue uniform. So he even looked like a Blue Jays uniform, like that doppelganger for Bo Bichette. But he was just hitting the ball hard, not like a guy that's going to hit 30 home runs, but he hits the ball hard, plays a really good center field. He had a nice diving catch out there, runs the bases. He has that leader mentality. He's always chirping. He's always keeping the guys involved. He's always got a smile on his face. You can tell he loves what he does. So he's a guy that I think is going to be a nice riser this year too.
Speaking of risers, we saw some guys really come into their own this year. You mentioned Skeens. I think Jackson Merrill is another guy that had a really impressive rookie season. Who do you think has a good chance to pop next year? Who do you think we're going to see in the running for the 2025 Rookie of the Year?
So right at the bat, Andrew Painter absolutely is one of them. I mean, we got a few right here on the Red Sox. I mean, Roman Anthony, obviously, Christian Campbell. I'd probably say those two more so than, a Meyer or a Teal. I think there's a bit more wow factor with Anthony and Christian Campbell. So I think you could see them really pop off. Matt Shaw with the Cubs, I think sneaky. He's not one of those loud prospects that has massive power or massive speed, but he just does everything really, really well. And that he's out with Team USA right now. And I think he's had like 7 home runs in 8 games or something like that. He's just killing it out there. And probably going to be up with the Cubs pretty early this year. I think you can see Jackson Jobe as well. I mean, he got a little cup of coffee with Detroit and was there for their surprising, postseason push and run that they had. I think he's going to be up with them, the entire year. I mean, outside of Trick Skubal, and Reese Olson, that rotation is, not kind of suspect. So obviously, when you have one of the better pitching prospects in the game, you kind of, who's ready, you throw him in there. So I think Jackson Jobe is definitely going to be a big contributor this year. And of course, the Dodgers have one as well with Dalton Rushing, catcher prospect, but he's kind of transitioned to the corner outfield role later in the year. So I think he could be, a backup to Will Smith and play some left field, kind of what Dalton Varsho was doing a few years ago. And he's been one of the better hitters in the minor leagues, a high OBP guy, doesn't strike out a lot, hits for power, very polished hitter. So I think you could see him really hit the ground running and be a pretty good bat right away. And Jordan Lawler and Chase Lauder are the last two I'll mention, Arizona and Cleveland respectively there. Both of them are, I think, top 10 prospect talents, but they've had a hard time staying healthy. Chase Lauder's been a lot of foot issues. Lawler's been like a lot of lower body, like hamstring, calf, knee, stuff like that. So not a lot of time on the field the last couple of years for those two. But when they have it on the field, you can tell the talent is high level. So if they can stay healthy, I think they'll be up with each of their respective teams for a good chunk of the year, and they could definitely factor into that Rookie of the Year voting as well.
You had, I know you kind of preluded to this earlier in the show, but obviously with you being so close to Portland, Maine, it was a good year to live that close to Hadlock Field there with the amount of talent that you got to see. What was that experience like? I guess just getting to see those guys, especially all the top prospects with the Red Sox, but even, there was other guys from around the Eastern League that would come in there. Like, I guess, what was it like this year? Like the competition you saw and I guess the high level of prospects you saw this year compared to others?
It was phenomenal just to have, start the year. I knew I'd get the big three, right? So I was already very excited for the season to start here in Portland. And then you add Christian Campbell in middle of the season. I think there was, some hype around Campbell. We liked him. But then for him to turn that big three into a big four and be another top 10 overall prospect in baseball, I don't think anybody saw that coming at least to that extent. So to have all 4 of those guys with the Sea Dogs at one time, you don't see that very often. I kind of equate it to, what year would that have been? I want to say 2019, when the New Hampshire Fisher Cats, about 2 hours from me, AA for Toronto, when they had Vlad, Bo, Lourdes Gurriel, and Kevin Biggio back when he was still good in that same lineup. And Lourdes Gurriel was a man child. He was so big at that time. To have them hitting 2, 3, 4, 5 in the order or whatever, was just unfair to the rest of the league. And that was the same thing with Boston this year. And unfortunately, Meyer obviously missed some time with injury, but yet to see those guys come through was absolutely phenomenal. And yeah, it kind of comes in waves. Like some years don't get a lot of great talent coming through here because obviously Eastern League is like 12 teams. So sometimes, like Colorado, which is Hartford, was really good a few years ago. A lot of good guys come through. Lately, they're on a little bit of a downswing. Same with like Richmond, who's San Francisco. So kind of there's the ebbs and flows of minor leagues. But yeah, just have those four hitters. A few years ago, we had a lot of good pitching come through here in Portland. Not so much hitting. So it's up and down hitting and pitching. But yeah, it was. I was trying to get to every game I possibly could. So I was like, all right, I know they're going to be up with Worcester and then up with Boston shortly here. So I was trying to get as many live looks as I could. And they were all incredibly impressive. Just even, looking, obviously everyone likes offense and they're great offensively, but watching Kyle Teal, call a game, watching him, throw the ball behind the runner at first, throw a guy out at second. I mean, we know with Boston, we love our catchers, and I think he's going to be a fan favorite. And obviously Anthony, Campbell, Meyer, they're all phenomenal. Which one of them is still here come opening day? We shall see. But yeah, it was truly a treat to see four prospects of that caliber here at one time. I mean, two of them here at one time would have been phenomenal in itself, but four at the same time, that's something you don't get very often.
I have a little random question before I throw at that, and you can take us home, Ed. But I checked off a couple stadiums this year, minor league stadiums that I'd never been to before. And I was kind of asking around, like I was asking our friend Ian Kundle with Sox Prospects, and because he's seen a lot of different stadiums, and I was always curious. I'm just like, I feel like I was so spoiled being in Worcester and having the access we did, and the ballpark's beautiful. It's it's brand new, it's huge. They draw a ton of fans. So I checked off New Hampshire this year, and I went down to Harrisburg for a game. So I kind of saw a few different places, and obviously like Hadlock and what is it, Duncan Field in Hartford.
Yep.
Yeah. So I checked off a few of them this year. What are some of your favorite places to see a game, whether it just be like the atmosphere or the park? Like, I guess, like, what would it be?
So you kind of let me into one of them. I was going to say, I love Dunkin' Donuts Park in Hartford. First time I was down there was back in 2019. I went down for those back-to-back days that Erie was in town, AA for Detroit. And that was back when Casey Mize and Matt Manning were like two of the five best pitching prospects in baseball. They're going back-to-back days. It was like a Tuesday, Wednesday, middle of the week. So I took a couple of days off of work. Me and a buddy drove down, got a hotel room, stayed for the night, and then went to the next game the next day. So that was my first time going to that park. I've gone a few times since then, but I think that's a great park. Northeast Delta Dental Stadium. It's always a tongue twister for me for some reason. In New Hampshire is a great park as well. They do a phenomenal job with even just like the in between games, the experience for the kids, which is something I think Portland lacks a little bit. Their stuff can kind of stale, but I think New Hampshire's done a great job. I've also been to Harrisburg. I think that's it's a nice rural kind of stadium. I like that a lot. A lot of the ballparks out in Arizona are just phenomenal. You got the mountain ranges and some of them in the distance, which is just phenomenal to look at. And they're obviously they're a little bit higher end because they're also spring training ballparks for the major leagues. But Peoria complex, which I think is San Diego and Colorado. I'm probably getting that second team wrong, but that is a phenomenal complex. I love Talking Stick, Salt River. Actually, no, that's Colorado. That's what the Colorado team is. But a lot of those ballparks out there are phenomenal as well. I'm trying to get to more. That's the hard thing. Like in Maine, I'm not near a ton of them. I'm not like in a baseball hotbed. Like Chris Clegg is. He's got like 6,000 ballparks within half an hour from, I swear. But I'm trying to get to more. Anytime I travel, whether it be seeing family or whatever, try to go like, oh, is there a ballpark nearby? Let's go to that. Just to get new ballparks in the mix and experience more. But yeah, I love checking out new ballparks, whether it be majors or minors. Yeah, it's always a lot of fun.
So I've got 2 shorter baseball questions and 1 food question that we're going to end it on.
Ooh, okay.
So I feel like everybody that's ever done fantasy or something similar to that has a story like this, where it's a player that they are just supremely proud of getting before anyone else knew about them. For me, it was Freddie Freeman, who I didn't even want to be my first baseman. I needed a first baseman. I wanted Ike Davis. Ike Davis went the pick before me. Freeman was my runner-up and immediately just went on to be, I think he's going to end up being a Hall of Famer. I think he's had a really good career. Do you have a player like that you've drafted?
Top of my head, I think I was pretty early on like a Jaron Duran. You know, I saw the pieces there. I saw him in Double-A. You know, this is back before he was really a huge prospect. He was hitting well. But back then he was more of a hit for average and steal bags guy. The power wasn't quite there. And then we saw, I saw him that transformation where the power was there, but then he sold out for power, wasn't hitting for contact anymore. So I was always like, I'm going to get some, shares now because his, kind of perceived value has dropped a little bit because people are like, oh, he sold out. He's never going to be good. They're like, all right, but what if he puts it all together? What if he finds that middle ground between hitting for contact, hitting for power, and look what we have now. He found that middle ground, and he's turned into an all-star and one of the best, hitters in baseball. So, yeah, I'll say he's one of my guys. I'm trying to think of the top of my head. Yuri Perez was a guy I liked a lot early on, and I give a lot of credit to a friend of mine who I used to a podcast with back in the day, Jesse Roche. He was super in it, and he had turned me on to Yuri Perez, and obviously, Yuri missed a lot of the year last year, but just getting a guy like Yuri, because pitching is so finicky with injuries and performance that even the top guys, if you invest a lot into them, usually more often than not, it bites you, right? So I love getting those guys, like a Yuri Perez before they blow up, and that's where you get the real value. So Yuri Perez is another one I liked for a long time. Matt McClain with Cincinnati. I know he missed this past year too, but I was always a big Matt McClain guy dating back to his days at UCLA. So he's probably another one I'd say is one of my bigger kind of hits over the last few years.
So I'm going to put you on the spot with this one, and all of America is going to know, and you've really got a 1 in 30 chance here. So I'm going to let you shoot your shot. Where does Roki Sasaki sign?
So originally, I think all of us thought, all Dodgers, because obviously they have Yamamoto, Ohtani, they have that heavy influence there already. Then you hear, oh, maybe he wants to go to a more of a small market team with a good kind of, development system. So I'm like, all right, now the options have kind of opened up. So I'm trying to think of a place that kind of has all of that. I think Seattle, I think could be a good landing spot. Although I think for that to happen, they would have to first make a trade because obviously their rotation's already stacked. So maybe they trade, with us, with the Red Sox or whoever. So I think that could only happen if they trade like a Bryce Miller, Brian Wu, Logan Gilbert, or whoever. So I can see that. But if I only give one answer, it's weird to say, but I think Pittsburgh could be kind of like dark horse. I feel weird saying that, but
I like that.
Pittsburgh has done really well with, especially on the pitching side, especially with their development, obviously Skeens, but, Bubba Chandler, Thomas Harrington, they have a lot of good young pitchers. So, if that whole, small market with good development thing really is, the truth and not just blowing smoke, I could see Pittsburgh doing, especially it won't cost as much this year as opposed to if he came over next year. He would have been a much bigger contract. So maybe this is something Pittsburgh could actually afford. So I guess I'll go with a fun answer and go with Pittsburgh.
I like that too because then you get to play in one of the most gorgeous stadiums in the world. Like that's that's one of the best. So that I kind of like that answer. Now though, I'm going to be just thinking Cleveland the entire time because it's like,
oh yeah,
that's a team that was. Yeah, the AL is up for grabs. You add him to that rotation, You put him in there, and with what they've been able to develop, I like that it's not just a guarantee to the Dodgers also, because that would upset me.
Right.
So here's your final question for today, and we ask this to everybody that comes on here. At least every player that we've had on has answered this. So you can go to any fried chicken place. Okay, it's got to be a fast food place, so it has to have like a drive-through. But you can go to any of them. Your Zaxby's, your Chick-fil-A's, your Popeyes, whatever. Which one are you going to?
Ooh. So I think if you had asked me this like 5 years ago, I would have given a different answer because we didn't have this particular one that I'm going to say up here in Maine yet. But ever since we got Chick-fil-A, I mean,
Chick-fil-A it is.
We finally got one 2 hours north of me was the first one we got in a city called Bangor. We got that, I think, it was about 5-6 years ago. Now we have a couple more down here closer to me. So, yes, as first time I had that, I was like, oh, man, this is a game changer. I mean, I love Popeyes as well. I don't think there's no Zaxby's close to me, unfortunately. And I've tried others, when I've traveled. But, yeah, I think if I had to pick just one, I think I would go Chick-fil-A.
That's my pick, too. We have a theory on this. That I have a theory, at least, that it's Parker's endgame to just get sponsorship from Zaxby's because he's a fanatic, I would say.
It's gonna happen one of these days. Every time we ask that question, we don't get enough Zaxby's. Like I think Blaze Jordan is probably our top Zaxby's guy, and like Alex Pinellas and a few others. And it's like, all right, well.
We had someone recently, remember?
Yeah.
It was like one of the younger guys that was on. It was
Conrad Kaysen.
Yeah, it was Conrad Kaysen was like really into Zaxby's. But
so one of these days.
Yeah, one of these days we'll get that. But do you have anything else you want to let out of the tank?
No, I think you taking us home, Ed.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Eric. Where can people find you if they want to see you on social media? They want to read your writing. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at EricCross04. I'm also on Blue Sky now, just another outlet if people are on there. Eric Cross MLB Blue Sky I'm still trying to figure out those longer handles that kind of confuse me. But Eric Cross MLB whatever the ending part of that is. I'll figure it out eventually. I'm still new over there. I've only been on it for like a week. Just another place to post my stuff. But yeah, I post everything through Twitter. I have FTN Fantasy, RotoBaller, 2 sets I write for. I have my Patreon as well. A lot of my rankings and stuff like that live there. That's linked to my bio on Twitter as well. And then the Toolshed Podcast. We're doing 1 episode a week right now for a little bit. Go back up to 2 episodes in December, and I think that's it. I think I covered everything.
Yeah, well, really great having you here, and we will see you all next time.